So I went ahead and I'm putting this video up just because these plans are floating around there and you see them on vintage projects and you'll see it other places, and I know other people have built the same lathe. I didn't follow it exactly, you know, there are some variations because I build using a lot of spare parts I have laying around, so I didn't follow the plans exactly. I do think there are better plans out there. I think some lathes are more elegant than this, obviously, and functionally maybe better too. This one works okay, and it does what it's supposed to do, and I'm happy with it, but the plans that you find give you a lot of information, but they don't give you 100% of the information, and I just think that this is probably not the best design that there is out there, but it was fun to build and it works, and I'll probably get some good out of it. So this was the start of the frame. It's just construction lumber, and it's mostly just scraps and things that I had laying around. The bed is just 2x4s. Everything is just carriage bolts and nuts. And then where things come together, it's a bolt, you know, pocketed with a nut, and it's kind of hardware intensive. It's easy enough joinery, and it's pretty sturdy, but it's maybe not the best way that you could join it.
So in order to mimic the pulley sizes that they use in the plans, they have you make pulleys out of wood. But since I have a lot of this stuff on hand, I think I can modify it and make it work with some existing pulleys. So this big one, I'll put the concrete counterweight on, and that is a 16.5-inch pulley, which the plans call for about a 17-inch pulley. So that's going to be really close, and I'll make a bushing for the center to get it down to the 1/2-inch hub. This one is almost exactly the right size as the 12-inch pulley, and it came off of a Treadle sewing machine. But I think what I'm going to do is I will cut this hub off, make that smooth. Then I've got a little additional counterweight. I can bore a hole in the center and match it up with this 4-inch pulley, and that gives me the step down, and it's kind of a nice looking pulley, and I think it'll make the lathe look kind of fancy. So that's the plan. Okay, so this is what I ended up with. Cut off that arm that came for the old flywheel. I ended up using just a block of wood, and it's anchored on that side. I've got it screwed in through this. It was actually interesting how soft this cast iron was. It was really easy to drill with the hub in the center, and I'll be able to lock it to the shaft with that set screw there. So I think I'll just clean that up and shoot a coat of paint on it.
So here we're making the tailstock, and the plans outline everything pretty good. It's just made from 2x8 construction lumber.
This is just a hand wheel I made. It's got a square nut inside that I just chiseled out, recessed the nut, took a washer, and I countersunk those heads. So holds the nut in there, but the nut can actually still shake around a little bit for alignment.
So the plans call for, I think, a 1/2-inch bar in the tailstock. I ended up using a large 5/8 bolt, and because I had one laying around, and then so I had to make a center for it, a dead center. So here I'm just taking a piece of rod and turning it down to a point, so something to center the workpiece on. Here's my little live center I made. It'll fit on that 5/8 bolt. So, or not live center rather, but dead center.
Okay, so I got my bearing installed. So this rides on that bearing, but it doesn't give any thrust protection. So then this washer it's bigger than that hole, so it puts all the pressure on the frame. And then I've got a small spacer, and then I've got this bearing, which is a thrust bearing. So that'll make it so all that thrust will be applied against the frame and not against those other two bearings, those radial bearings. So they take up all the spinning. That'll take all the thrust.
So this shaft and the headstock, it's just 1/2 inch mild steel. I turned it down to a point and made this drive spur for it, and I ended up redoing this a little bit. Where it comes to a taper on the tip of that rod, I ended up turning that down to a way sharper point. That point was way too broad and blunt. It didn't work very good. I turned it down to a real fine, more like a nail sticking out of the end, and then it worked pretty good. And the other part is just a 1/2 inch coupler, shaft coupler. Okay, so for this main pulley, to increase the mass, I used a 1-inch shaft, and I had these old bearings laying around, so they're way heavier than they need to be, but it does add mass and it does add some weight. To adapt it, I had to take a couple of pieces of pipe, shoved in one another to make a bushing so it fit like it was supposed to. There's the pulley that I made before, and it's pretty heavy, so it adds a lot of mass too. I've got this just the right length, so I don't really need a tensioner. It's not tight by any means. It's kind of loose. And this is an old dried out belt. But even with being a little loose, it grabs pretty good. Temporarily, I just made a little belt out of string, little piece of rope on this. I think I'm gonna. You can buy like a neoprene type of belt material, and I think I could make a better belt, or just use a bigger rope, because that works pretty good. You do get a little bit of belt slip if there's much pressure put on this, but like I showed before, I made a way to attach a grinding wheel right there, and I'll probably make some kind of a tool stand to come out of that. On this side, this shaft's going to have to be cut off shorter. You know, I've got my thrust bearing, the plate isn't in there, so this is not complete by any means. The treadle, I just kind of rigged it up. It's not very pretty. I think I can make it look better, but it does have a bearing, just like an old skateboard bearing that I put inside a hub that was just a plumbing fitting. And then there is a bushing, a small brass bushing in the bottom. It's kind of hard to see. But anyway, definitely nothing fancy. Now that I've got everything kind of set up, I'll do a few final adjustments. The tool rest is just it's two pieces of pipe, just water pipe, one shoved over the other. Just a piece of steel welded on. Nothing fancy, but it gives you an adjustment. That's just on a piece of oak. That's just sawdust. Tailstock. Okay, so I got the lathe kind of all put together, and I did a test run, and it works pretty good. I had to make a few changes, so I ended up putting a belt tensioner on this main pulley, on the big pulley. Kind of hard to see. And it just has a spring holding it tight, and it isn't very tight. It's pretty loose, in fact. It just puts a little tension on it. I've still got my rope driving the main drive, and I thought it would slip. I did end up crossing it, and it seems to be doing great. If I ever replace it, I will probably replace it with a urethane belt, but for now it's doing real good. I got my grinding wheel on the end. I'll still make a tool stand for that, but anyhow, it's pretty easy to pedal. It seems to have enough strength that it can keep it going. Granted, this is just a piece of softwood, but the adjustment is done. That just locks that shaft, and then that'll advance that or withdraw that. My homemade drive is working fine. If it ever gives me issue, I'm gonna buy one of those Shopsmith 5/8 drives that you can get online. That's working good for now. So basically that's it. I'll throw on a video of me using it a little bit.